You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This is another episode with Gary Zukav. And in this episode, we talk, no surprise, about authentic power, and we talk about developing authentic power. We talk about the frightened parts of your personality. We talk about a word that I used, and I think you're going to like his answer. We talked about managing the change and chaos in the world. I know that we all see it, and it's very challenging for a lot of people and creating a lot of fear for a lot of people. I do want to point out that the higher aspect of you and the multisensory you doesn't, air quote, get into the fear that's actually controlling a lot of people on the planet right now. So we talk about a higher order and a higher function of being, specifically being a multisensory being. And we talk about something that we all are in the middle of, and we're all experiencing this. We talk about the world that's crumbling around us. And I even asked Gary, because someone asked me to, how does he manage the world crumbling around him? And I think you're going to find his answer fascinating. But he did say something that was really interesting, and I understand it the same way, but in different language from my brother-in-law, the shaman, Don Javier, is that Don Javier's told me that humans were evolving to a higher level of consciousness, and all of the old ways are falling away. In Gary's explanation, as you'll hear about in this episode, Gary talks about we are evolving from a five-sense being, meaning the five physical senses, to a multi-sensory being. And as we're doing that, the old power structures, which have been created on the planet many thousands of years ago, and we've lived in terms of society and socialization, government structure and economic policy and world order, we've lived in artificial, man-made power structures, and that's all crumbling at this point. Regardless, listen, assimilate, and find best how you can apply what Gary and I are talking about in your own life to evolve and grow yourself, to raise your frequency, and to become a multisensory being. Okay, enjoy the episode. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so in the last episode, you had talked a lot about, and working with my brother-in-law, the shaman, that's been the number one four-letter word for 27 years of my life. Love. And you mentioned love a lot. So the question is, a lot of times we're thinking, because I observe that many people, they do have love, but they love conditionally. I love you as long as you do X, Y, Z, or I want that in my life. But we don't understand, for the most part, as a species, yet unconditional love and real love. So from your perspective, what is love?
What you've just described are artificial artifacts of five-sensory perception. Conditional love is a meaningless term. Love is love. There's nothing.
But what is love?
Oh, let me give you some words that point in that direction.
Okay.
Love is inclusive. It accepts. It engages. It is interested. It supports without second agendas. It is all that is. Let me put it this way. Linda and I had a friend on Maui, Ram Dass, who wrote
Mm.
the iconic book, Be Here Now.
Yeah.
And we got to know him the last 3 years when we were both on Maui, Linda and I, and Ram Dass and his wonderful ohana. And once while we were in his house, I noticed on one of the walls in a hall, like a frame, a frame with a glass front, but where there would be a print or a piece of artwork behind the glass was a dirty square of carpeting, like something that came out of a poorly managed building that wasn't maintained, an office building that people had walked on for years. And it was framed in this glass. And I asked, what is this? And that was done because the story of that is that a friend of Ram Dass was asking Ram Dass, do you love my friend over here as much as you love me? And Ram Dass said, yes. He said, well, do you love that person over there as much as you love me? And Ram Dass said, yes. And he said, well, that person over there, that stranger that's shouting, do you love that person as much as you love me? And Ram Dass said again, yes. And then the friend pointed down to where they were standing in his office and said, do you love this carpet this dirty carpet as much as you love me? And Ram Dass said, yes.
Mm.
Now, at first I thought that was a clever kind of Zen-like teaching story.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize Ram Dass was not doing that. He was sharing his awareness. He was sharing his consciousness. Think about that. What kind of consciousness was Ram Dass? It was Zen Ram Dass. What kind of consciousness was he that could say yes, truthfully? Jack Kornfield, who was a friend of his, and I believe may have been a student, changed the way that he teaches mindfulness meditation, if I understand Jack correctly when he told me, from teaching awareness to teaching loving awareness, which is what Ram Dass described. His awareness, loving awareness. What kind of loving awareness would it be that could include, with love, everything that it can see? Well, obviously, some things are dirty, some things are repulsive, some things smell bad, some things are dangerous. So is he making himself love all of those things, or is it something deeper, something far more meaningful, even easier? We all know, well, I don't know if we all know anything. I don't know anything like that.
That's a powerful statement.
But I all know that I have experienced this thought before. The world must all be made of some kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all made of this same kind of stuff. So what is it? Is it subatomic particles? Is it microorganisms? What is it? What is the stuff of the universe? Well, I know now. It's love. There is no other stuff. There's nothing that you can put in a box and ship across the country to a friend and say, here's a box of love. When that runs out, let me know. I'll send you some. You can't do that. Love is. The universe is love. Everything is love. I didn't have the consciousness I have now when Linda and I were having dinner with Ram Dass. So I didn't have a chance to ask him this question, but I think he knew that he was looking at the stuff of the universe, wherever his eyes fit.
Do you think that people like Ram Dass, and I'm going to include you in that category, that they come with I don't know the right word, but a spiritual mission to help other people, here's the word, awaken to higher function of mind, self, consciousness?
I can't speak for Ram Dass. I
Fair.
don't know. Me, all I thought about in the first half of my life was sex from women, motorcycles for me, music, drugs for me. And I admired myself, but I didn't really I didn't really admire myself at all. In fact, that's why I was so prickly. So if some the street word is macho. Macho
Mm.
is a word for someone who's so frightened he doesn't even know he's frightened.
Yeah.
So in those days, if you'd have said, "Do you think that you entered the Earth School, Gary, with a mission to help people wake up?" I would say, "Well, I'm awake for one thing, and I don't think you're very cool myself." I mean, there would be no way that I could relate to that question.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I met the first that the non-physical teacher that became my life. Uh, was not
Was that Genesis?
yes,
Okay.
and that I had a thought of anything else. And the first time I talked to Genesis, it was through a channel, and the channel spoke the words of Genesis for an entire afternoon. With so much time, we had to break once in the morning, then a break again, and then once in the afternoon. But I went back and I've studied transcription, and that was the first time I heard, I first entertained the thought that I might have a purpose for living. And I'm writing about this now. I want to share all of it. So there's nothing mystical or mysterious about it. It's simply a sharing from one multisensory individual to others, from the heart to the heart. But it wasn't until then that I was introduced to the idea of first, I'll say he, but I have no idea if this is a he or a
Right.
she. I ask, "What are you?" And he said, "I'm an impersonal energy dynamic." Some people even give me names as though I were a personality, but I'm an impersonal energy dynamic. And I've participated in the evolution of galaxies and in the evolution of your planet now. And I think all of those at the same time, but I know. So he began to say things like a task or a mission. And that piqued my curiosity. But what do you mean, task or mission? And who gave me this task and mission? And
Does it have a motorcycle on the task?
yeah,
Right. And
I just thought, what is this? It's very interesting. And then he told me, you have a task, you have a mission. And they told me that every soul, when it incarnates voluntarily, contrary to popular thought, because life can be so very difficult in the Earth School, but incarnation into the Earth School is voluntary, and that it's not easy to come by. Once Genesis told me, if you knew what needs to be accomplished to have a life on this planet, you would walk the planet every moment with appreciation and gratitude. But as it is, there are millions of people upon your planet who regret being on it, who
mm,
painful experiences of abuse, of humility, of torture, of imprisonment, of sickness, of despair. So that's what I wanted to share as I tell you this part. Before incarnation, each soul confers with other souls, with its teachers, and with the universe about this coming incarnation if it occurs. There's nothing deterministic about it. It's more if certain conditions come into being and certain other conditions come into being, then these two souls will come into contact. And if other conditions and other circumstances come into being, then other souls will come into contact with you. There is no twin flame. There is no something waiting for you. There's not even a future waiting for you. You create the future with your choices. And the soul gives to the incarnation the parts of itself that it desires to heal, so to speak, through the choices of its incarnation in the Earth School, through the free will of its personality. And it also gives to the personality parts of itself that are already aligned with itself. And these are the loving parts. Gratitude, I mentioned them, appreciation, caring, patience, contentment, all of the universe. And as you align yourself with those, you bring the energy of your soul into the Earth School. And that is the purpose of your life, to bring the energy of your soul consciously into the Earth School. That is the creation of authentic power, and that is now our way of evolving. That is now our evolutionary necessity. So I did not know until I was midway through my life, which whatever that would be. I was born in 42 and this was 85. And I'm 81. You do the math. That's about halfway through to where I am now. And I had no idea of anything about any of this, much less a mission, a contract with the universe. But it is a contract with the universe. It's a sacred contract. Those are Genesis words. Genesis words. And I didn't know about mine or that I had one, but I do now. And as soon as I heard it, he said, your contract with the universe is to master and embody authentic power and help teach it to others. I liked it the first time I heard it. I've liked it ever since.
I would say, who wouldn't like that? I'll take that mission. I'm kidding, but yeah, that's powerful. That's why
it felt good. It felt right, Jim. I didn't think about it. He told me, and it felt good.
That's why I had asked you off camera a lot after our first time we talked about the soul contract or experience between you and Oprah's, your soul and Oprah's soul, and that Oprah was one of the most impactful people of a generation in terms of getting people just to be nice to each other and to open up and to think and to evolve and to grow.
Yes, she's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, she's made a huge impact for a lot of people at the multisensory level. And I know that she said,
and at the 5 sensory level too.
Yes. And she said that if it wasn't for you, then she wouldn't have gone on to do what she did in the direction she wanted to go. And that's why I was asking you, just more, not even rhetorically, just out of curiosity, and we wouldn't know that, is I wonder what agreement your souls had that you, bringing this mission, would meet up with her at a certain space-time continuum, so to speak, the word time, but a certain intersection to bring, because you've impacted tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. So she was part of that facilitation. And I'm wondering what agreement the souls had to have that happen.
I do not know, but I do know that it was meaningful, purposeful, and appropriate that Oprah and I came into connection with each other in the way that we did. And when something like that happens, and that's a very exceptional experience, obviously, well, it was in my life, I never took it personally. In other words, I never felt grateful to Oprah. I love Oprah. I admire her. Admire is too small a word. It's a very small word when it comes to what I feel for Oprah. Her power, that's authentic power. When I look back at, let me put it this way, whenever something happens to me in my life, I say to the universe, thank you. Whether it's that pain that I felt when Linda's soul returned home, or whether the surprise I felt when someone that I didn't know called me to tell me about a television show and said her name was Oprah. And then I began to experience things that I hadn't before in terms of being able to communicate and share these things with so many people. I would say to the universe, thank you. I don't know if I've ever said thank you to Oprah because she wasn't doing it for me. She wasn't doing it for herself. She was doing it because her heart guided her, because she was following her meaning. And for everyone that's listening to this podcast or watching it, and I know that many of you, probably all of you, would like to know what your sacred contract with the universe is if you don't already know, I would suggest that you follow your meaning. Use that as your inner compass. Whatever it is, its needle is always pointing toward meaning. Follow it. See where it takes you. It may not take you to meaning immediately, but it'll take you to something that's more meaningful than what you're doing now. And then that will lead you, and that will lead you. Where will it lead you? It'll lead you to love. It'll lead you to the creation of authentic power. It'll lead you to consciously using your life to align it with your soul and to experience power authentic, and then to share it with others. Not to proselytize, not to teach, not to convert. That is not a part in any way of authentic power. But because you feel in the moment it's appropriate, your part is recognizing appropriate timing, clear motivation, and trust. Genesis told me once, remember these things, Gary, when you teach not to impress, but to empower. Not yourself, but others. Say that to yourself if you feel like teaching something. And as a further guide, at another time, he told me, if you say anything with an intention other than to increase the admiration of the universe at large, or respect, or something like that of the universe at large, you have an agenda, and fear has entered the picture.
I've been on a lot of interviews myself, and the worst ones to be on is when the host doesn't help me at all. And it's basically, okay, where do they want me to go? Where do I go, et cetera. So I'm just flowing with you, and we're just going. And I just appreciate everything that's coming from you. And I'm sure listeners do well, because I am often asked, Jim, how do I find my purpose? And so many people in the world we live in talk about, well, your purpose, they call it a vocation. That's not a purpose.
No.
And I didn't watch a lot of Oprah. I did not, but I saw you on Oprah like in 91 or 92. And it was by accident that I saw you, because I was just walking somewhere and the TV was on there, and it wasn't at home, it was out in public. And I'm like, I'll just watch this for a bit. And on her last season, I did watch half of the episodes. And she said, in 25 years of doing this, I've learned that people have three questions. Oprah, sorry, I know that you love me and Gary both. And I'm kidding. If you watch this, I might get the questions wrong. Do you hear me or do you see me? Does it mean anything to you? And do I matter? And the one about matter is, I did it for a lot of years, Gary, and I tell people this. The motivational speakers and this whole clan of people, they always talk about you have to have your why. I could never get my mind around why I'm on the planet. It's more of an analytical exercise. And when I look at meaning, that excites me, is looking at what's my meaning on the planet. And my meaning is, when I had the stroke, I could not talk for several hours afterwards. I remember being in the ER. I couldn't talk. And then I passed out. They took me on a helicopter, and a couple of days later, I woke up in the ICU. And afterwards, the doctors tried to plant a lot of fear in me about, oh, you could have a second stroke and all these kind of things. I won't go into that here. But the only fear that I let affect me was, because I didn't care if I did care if I left the planet, but I'm okay because I'm going to leave the planet, and I'll leave when I'm done with my work on the planet. But the most fearful thing to me was, what if I can't talk? How am I going to help people? This is my meaning. This gives me meaning, to be of spiritual service to other people. And I think a lot of people don't understand that it's about the meaning, not about the external things, not about the money, not about the popularity, which is why many people are in our industry. They want the recognition, the adulation. It's about none of that. It's about the meaning that I bring to the experience of other people. Anyway, I don't know where that came from, but I wanted to share that I can resonate, and hopefully people listening can too. It's about the meaning.
I've learned that I can't affect other people. I don't have that power. I can't change other people. Only they have that power. So I do my best to share like we're doing
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
without a second agenda.
Yeah.
If I have one, I try to see it and move beyond the control of it.
When we started talking, I apologize for interrupting. What you're telling me is very congruent because I could sense, I could feel when we talked, you were very loving and very open. It's like, what can I do to assist you? And I knew when you said that, you were very genuine about that. And to me, that's reflective of the meaning in your life is what can I do to assist with an open heart other people have a better experience or more aware experience on the planet?
I don't really ask those questions, Jim. I think about them sometimes, of course, because that's what I love to think about. Well, of course. But I'm back to those three questions that Oprah said she realized everybody wants. Do you hear me? Do you see me? Do I matter to you? Before Linda's soul returned home, I didn't really hear people as well as I hear them. And I didn't really see them. And if I did, often it was in terms of what I could. And I
Mm,
wasn't calculating. Something in me was calculating, if that's a better way to put it. And do I matter to you? And I would have to say to that person that I was, that I thought the opposite for all of these questions. I thought the opposite. But I hear you, I see you, but I'm looking back on it now from where I am now. And I'm seeing things about me that I couldn't see at the time. Genesis said, and they're painful, so painful. And especially about the way I could relate to Linda. I see now how I could have supported her so much better. I couldn't have loved her more. I just
mm,
loved her. But I could have helped her. I could have supported her. And Genesis said, when you look at these things, you're not seeing them in order to contract. Their purpose is not for you to contract, but to learn from them and apply them. And so that's what I strive to do, no matter what they are. I know I can answer Oprah's three questions that she perceived in all people easily. Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, I can hear you. Can you see me? Yes, more than I ever thought it was possible to see somebody. I can see the movement of a soul. I can see the nature of human consciousness. I can see pain in you. I can see joy in you. I can see where you're not aware because you're obsessed or compulsive or judgmental or blaming. And I can see the pain that you're in. Yes, I can see you. And I love you. I can see that you're a soul. I can see it. I can see it here. It's not, no, it has nothing to do with this. It has to do with this. Do I matter to you? Yes. Yes. It's only when frightened parts of my personality enter the picture that something else could matter to me more. Do I have frightened parts of my personality? I do. We talked about this earlier. Every personality has frightened parts. But when they're not in control of me, you matter. You matter. Best example of this to me, for me, is Linda. Once she slipped on ice. Our son was with us, and she was thrown in the air for a minute and then, bam, fell to the ground and hit her head on a railing, like a railroad tie that was used for landscaping. And our son was so concerned that she had broken her neck, but she hadn't, and she recovered. But I knew in that moment, I knew that my life would change, that I would spend the rest of my life caring for Linda, and not as a martyr, not as a martyr. I just knew it. It's what I wanted to do. I haven't had a time to test it, but I think would I give my life for Linda's? I think so. Let me put it this way. I've had dreams of maybe, uh, if I ever saw Linda falling from a cliff, I would go after her. That's what I felt. This may all be fantasy, but the answer is this. I'm working toward becoming someone who can say all the time, you matter to me. But I can say it to a lot of people now. I couldn't say
Mm,
it to anyone except Linda before.
powerful. Okay, let me segue from the episode for just one moment. A long while back, Gary asked me in a conversation we were having how he could support me. And I knew he meant that from the heart. And I want to do the same for Gary. And even though he's a New York Times bestselling author and millions of people know who he is and they've read his books, I know that I can help him, at least from my little corner of the world. And I want to tell you very quickly about a program that he has. By the way, it's dirt cheap. So don't walk, run and get registered. It's only 37 bucks a month for his continuity site. And the membership is called An Evening with Gary Zukav. In my opinion, $37 is a no-brainer to spend an evening with Gary, getting to talk to him and to ask him questions. And what's included is a monthly 60-minute heart-opening Zoom call. It's live with Gary. You'll deep dive into relevant topics with Gary and get inspiration from Gary. You'll have the opportunity to dialogue with and ask Gary questions. And you'll also actually get journal prompts that will help you along the way. Those journal prompts are actually 3 curated journal prompts to deepen your self-exploration. Again, I've known who Gary is for a lot of decades. If you're listening to this podcast, obviously you're finding benefit. In my opinion, the guy's one of the greatest spiritual teachers of our time. So obviously you do not want to miss the opportunity and you want to hop on it to connect with him personally, to ask him questions. The notes will be on the links will be in the show notes. So go and get registered for 37 bucks a month and spend an evening with Gary Zukav. Okay, back to the episode. Well, that's extremely, and that also, I'm curious here, would making, I'm again, semantics, having other people matter, would that also be in your thinking, which I have found in my own life, in my journey, in my experience, the key to love and loving myself is accepting myself. Would you find that accepting people automatically or helps to make them matter in your experience?
Not the way you put it, Jim. For me, it's
Okay.
the same thing. If you can't love yourself, if you don't, you can. If you don't love yourself, you won't love other people because
Yeah.
they're not separate. So if you also say, I'm going to start to love myself so I can love other people, that's not it. That's the pursuit of external power.
Yeah.
That's a manipulation. And if you say it the other way around, I'm going to love other people, I'm going to learn how to do this so I can love me. That's not it either. That's not it. Creating authentic power is it. Learning to distinguish love from fear in yourself and choosing love no matter what is occurring in yourself or what is occurring outside of yourself. Choosing love. Experimenting with that. Not teaching, just sharing when appropriate. It's often not appropriate. I accepted your invitation because I could feel the bigness of your heart. I could feel that for you to have a podcast and to have many people listening to it, that you would be drawing those people. And those are the kind of people it would be appropriate for me to share with and to experiment with, sharing some of the things that are new to my consciousness also, because we're all on this journey together. Everyone knows that, but the realization of it is even deeper than the knowing of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Did
Couple
that
of
answer, did that answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, it did. I think it did. Yeah, it did. Because so many people struggle. I see it all around me all the time. So many people struggle with self-acceptance. So from your perspective, would that be because they're more engaged with the frightful part of the personality than who and what they truly are, which is love. Would be why they struggle with self-acceptance.
Essentially, yes. The way I've been taught is that, and have experienced to a certain, and to the extent of my life, is that there exists within, well, I've been told there exists within every human the pain of powerlessness. The pain of powerlessness is the pain of wanting to belong and not belonging, wanting to be accepted and not being accepted, not being chosen for the team when you were young. It's the pain of wanting to love and knowing that you're not capable of loving, or wanting to be loved, needing to be loved and knowing that you're not lovable. It's not wanting anyone to see you the way you see yourself inside because they wouldn't want anything to do with you.
Mhm.
It's the feeling of being intrinsically flawed, inherently defective. It's self-loathing, and it's extremely painful. 5-sensory humans have the pain of powerlessness, and multisensory humans have the pain of powerlessness. The difference is that when 5-sensory humans experience it, they reach outward into the external world in order to mask that pain. They try to get a new friend, a new boyfriend, a new girlfriend, a new car, a new family, to make a new business. When multisensory humans, in other words, they pursue external power. When 5-sensory humans experience the pain of powerlessness, they pursue external power to mask that pain. When multisensory humans experience the pain of powerlessness, they look inside and change themselves. They create authentic power. Every frightened part of your personality is an expression of the pain of powerlessness, and every frightened part of your personality pursues external power. That is the nature and the definition of a frightened part. By now, I'm sure that everyone understands, or at least recognizes, the assumption, and in my case, it's an observation, that a personality is not a single thing, that sometimes gets happy and sometimes gets sad and sometimes gets lonely and sometimes is joyful. It is a complex, almost like a mandala. It's got many different parts. Some of them originate in fear and some of them originate in love. But these different parts see the same external world from a different perspective. And so their experiences are different. And creating authentic power gives you the ability to recognize when you are in a part of your personality, and you're always in one, a frightened or a loving part, and to recognize when it's a frightened part and choose to shift your attention to the interior of a loving part is power. That is authentic power. Authentic power is the experience of moving through the earth school with an empowered heart without attachment to the outcome.
How to stay out of fear? Would you say that it's a recognition when that part of our personality is getting into fear?
The question is not how to stay out of fear. The question, if you have one, is what can I do to move beyond the control of this part of my personality? And there's even better questions. What can I learn about myself from this part of my personality? One thing that you'll learn quickly is that you cannot give the gifts you're born to give when you are controlled by a frightened part of your personality. When you must make more money, when you must have a bigger home, when you must have sex, when you must have recognition, when you must have acknowledgement. When you experience those things in yourself, they are your opportunities to grow spiritually. They're not your obstacles to spiritual
Yeah.
growth, Jim. They're your opportunities. They're your avenues to spiritual growth. And Oprah told me something so beautiful once. At that time, Linda and I had met a friend who was a very famous rock star in his day, Kenny Loggins. And,
Yeah.
and Kenny had been invited to be on the cover of People's Magazine. And he was. And I got an invitation after I started doing shows with Oprah to be on the cover of People's Magazine. And I talked about it with Linda, and neither one of us liked at all the thought of inviting so many people into our home. Well, right now, we do that anyway. This is our living room, and we love inviting people into it. But that's what we felt at the time. We were living in Mount Shasta in a little cabin, and we decided not to, because I called Oprah and thought, I wanted to know, what do you think about that invitation that I have? And she said, it's just cotton candy, Gary. It's just cotton candy.
What did she mean by that?
It means nothing. It
Yeah.
means nothing, Gary. It's ephemeral. It melts away. It's not even worth buying. In fact, she might have even gone so far as to think it'll make you sick. It's pure sugar. There's nothing good about it, and there's nothing lasting about it. That was my first take. It's nothing substantial. It's nothing lasting. It's nothing even worth buying. That's crystallized what I was thinking about this invitation.
I'm still cracking up that when she first called you, you didn't know who she was back in the like 92 or whatever it was, because back then so many artists authors were clamoring to get on the Oprah show.
Yeah.
And so Oprah calls you and you don't even know who the woman is. That's pretty comical.
Yeah. It was later than that too, by the way. The first shows that we did, the first show was broadcast Christmas Eve afternoon in 98. So the shows you're seeing were about a decade later than you were thinking you were seeing.
Oh, okay.
But those were the shows. And living in Mount Shasta, I had a television set, but we didn't have we had cable. Or did we? I can't remember. I don't think we even had cable. I moved there in 87, and it's a small town. It was probably,
Yeah.
but I did have a VCR, so I would rent videos and I could watch movies. So I didn't know about the Oprah Winfrey Show or about Oprah. I had heard that name sounded vaguely familiar, but that was my acquaintance with Oprah at that time.
I find it interesting. You remind me of a friend of mine I've known for 25 years, and he actually has an endowed chair. You're also recognized by them, the World Business Academy. And he has an endowed chair, the Akio Matsumura endowed chair at the World Business Academy. And he's the same way. He's oblivious to names or personalities or any of that, because his whole life is about the focus of spiritual evolution of the younger generation. So when you told me that, I got a kick out of that story that you weren't even aware who the person was, when most people are like, oh my gosh, Oprah called, and they're running around like crazy because Oprah called, and you're, okay, who? So that to me is what I call spirit at work. So some simple questions here is Nina wanted me to ask you, how do you define the difference between spirit and soul?
I don't.
Okay. So next question, does the soul speak to us via intuition and inspiration? I think we answered that.
Your non-physical teacher does. Your soul, let's start with intuition. You can say
Okay.
your intuition is a faculty that comes to the forefront in multisensory perception. It is a major part of multisensory perception, which is the ability to see beyond the limits of the five senses.
Mhm.
Five senses together form a single sensory system whose object of detection is physical reality. Now we're acquiring another sensory system. We are multisensory. Intuition is like a radio receiver that can receive different stations. One of the stations it can receive, you might say, is your own higher self. Your higher self is personality, soul, communication. Your intuition can also receive information from other souls in advance of your own. Your intuition can also receive information from your non-physical teachers. That's with a capital T.
Yep.
You might say that the first, when you're intuiting, you're channeling your higher self, that's eating at home. But when you're in touch with non-physical teachers and their benefit that they can provide in the way of compassion and wisdom. That's more analogous to ordering out, but it's all the same faculty, intuition. Did that help?
No, that's
Understand?
powerful. And I was going to ask you on that question there because I was listening to you and I'm hearing this, and that's actually, I've never heard it explained that way. But a lot of people listening are probably wondering, and I'll share just a thought and then I'd love your perspective. They would like to open themselves up to higher awareness, a non-physical teacher, etc. Many people are saying, I want that. And I was thinking back to when you said this came to you, but you were so immersed in the 3D personality, the physical, the five senses, and all of that. Do you think that we have to be more open in terms of further along the evolutionary scale for the higher energies to come to us, the non-physical teachers?
That would help. But Francis also told me about intuition and trying to cultivate it. He said, if you're eating broccoli, tofu, in order to develop your intuition, but if you're judging other people, you might as well be eating beef steak or roast beef. What I'm saying is just to say, I'm going to be open to higher intuition. Well, there isn't higher and a lower intuition. I mean, there's intuition.
Okay.
But if the intention to open is there, that's good. That's good. But you need to know your intention. What's behind it? I asked Genesis once, how do I prepare for a conscious death? I want to be conscious when I die. I want to see the whole thing, experience it all. How do I do that? And Genesis said, I would suggest that you learn how to live consciously.
I've never heard anybody say it that way. I want to be aware. I want to be conscious of my death. Back to you talking about Linda earlier, my brother-in-law was once talking to me and he said, when you look at death, meaning with your five senses, it can be a very painful thing. But when you see death for the cosmicness of what it is and the energy, it's the most beautiful thing you will ever see. And I think that's what you're wanting or saying you want to experience is the beauty of the entire transition in the experience.
Well, you're making it more lovely than I felt at the time. I just wanted to experience it with awareness. But for one thing, just to be clear, in my understanding, the soul decides when it will return home, not the personality. Often the personality doesn't agree, usually doesn't agree, but it's the soul's decision. And it is the return home of a part of your soul that incarnated. It is not the end of your soul. That is
Yeah.
immortal.
When my mom passed in 2012, my brother-in-law, Don Javier, can see. He can energetically see. And prior to her passing, she had a lung cancer that metastasized into her brain. And prior to that, we were sitting in the living room with her, and he told her, he goes, he used to call her mom. He goes, Mom, don't worry, you're going to be fine. And I knew he could see because I've had experience. And she passed, I don't know, 6 months later. And I said to him, how come you told her she was going to be fine? And she interpreted that as, well, it's going to pass and I'm going to be on the planet. I said, how come you told her she was going to be fine and you knew she was going to pass? And he said, because her ego wants to stay, her 3D wants to stay, but her soul is ready to go. And when the soul is ready to go, you've got to let the soul do what the soul needs to do. And that's aligned with what you're saying is because there was another question that somebody asked me, but we don't choose. The soul chooses, as I understand, when we incarnate and when we leave. And it's not up to our 3D ego, either one is my understanding.
I understand that too. For example, I was taught that when Linda's soul went home in this way. I mentioned I was by her side when she had a stroke. I mentioned that I called the hospital ambulance and he came quickly. And then that we went to the regional medical center directly, and that as soon as I could get into the ER, the surgeon was already there, and he took her directly into the OR and then explained I couldn't do it. I was told also that when the soul decides to go home, nothing can stop it.
Yeah.
Jim, this was a great consolation, but I still hurt beyond measure. The universe arranged this departure of Linda's soul so that there was no possibility of my saying yes, but if. I couldn't say yes. But if I hadn't been with her, maybe she'd have had it in the afternoon and had to lie there for a night. That didn't happen. If
Yeah.
I could say yes, but maybe the ambulance had a flat tire or it couldn't get here and it couldn't get her to the hospital. But it did get her to the hospital very fast. And I couldn't say, but if I couldn't. Then, when she got to this busy regional medical center, she was immediately put into a room in the ER section, and the surgeon was there. So I couldn't say, well, the surgeon could have been in another operation that would have lasted 3 hours, but he wasn't. He was with my beloved. And then he was the best in this part of the country at endovascular thrombectomies. There's none better. And this is not a big hospital. This is a huge regional medical center. It is a big hospital with a lot of big things around it.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't do it. And that's why I realized when Linda went into the ICU room that Linda's soul is going. And anything else I could do, think to do, want to do, pray to do, would be trying to push the river. So my perception is, in many ways, the same as your cousin's. Genesis also told me that the thought that you're thinking when you return home will determine your awareness at the moment of your death. But let's talk about these things later because they're opening new conversations.
I'm making a note there. We're wrapping up on time. So we can pick that up on our next call because I would love to explore. And I'm just asking you questions and letting you go because I know you do a lot of these, but there's a lot of things coming that a lot of people need to hear. And I don't feel like I need to be interrupting you. So that's why I'm so quiet on my end. So
thank you, Jim. I appreciate the questions, and I appreciate the questions from your community.
okay, I've got some more, but they're simple ones.
I love questions more than anything. That's why I love live events.
Okay. Well then next time we talk, I will have some more questions for you, but a lot of them were more maybe superficial questions or things that might not have been impactful or more impactful with an answer. I think they're simpler things. But we'll pick up also because somebody had asked me about her partner and she was frustrated with her husband and she's all about spiritual growth and he's not. And we pick this up on our next conversation. And she's like, how do I manage myself when I'm growing and growing and he's not growing? So those are the kind of questions I will bring to you next time we talk.
Okay. And we can also talk about love, power, and death. These are good things too.
These are all my favorite topics because the best thing that ever happened to me was when I had this. Well, I didn't tell you this. I had a heart failure prior. So, and then I had a stroke and then I topped it off with a whipped cream sundae with COVID twice. So in that time I had learned that, hey, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But I learned to see more about myself in this experience of life. And I love talking about transition, death. But in our culture, people find it so morbid. And I'm like, this is the most beautiful topic you can talk about because there's power. There's authentic power to me when you explore this aspect of your entire experience. So next time we talk, I'd love to talk more about it.
Let's do that, Jim. Our culture is changing. Our culture is changing fast because our species is changing fast, which means that Thai culture, French culture, German culture, Chinese culture, Swahili culture, it's all changing. This is species-wide.
Yeah.
This is the context against which all is happening. This is the backdrop against which all is happening. This is the energy in which all is happening. It is the unprecedented, epic transformation of human consciousness itself. It's very exciting.
Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed this episode as much as I really, from the heart, enjoyed doing these episodes with Gary and bringing them to you. Come on back. We have 8 episodes in this series, 4 episodes of Gary and I, and then 4 episodes of me commenting and taking apart further what Gary and I have talked about. So make sure you come on back and listen to the entire series. And if you're new to the podcast, I tell people, because we often think that the older material is not as relevant. If you're new to the podcast, I tell people go all the way back to the beginning as well and start listening there. You will find that there is life-changing content all the way through these podcast episodes. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you over on another episode. Bye-bye.